My grandson told me I should just rest. You've done enough, Grandma. We'll handle things from now on. But when I called him, he didn't answer. When I knocked on his door, he wasn't home. When I needed him most, he wasn't there. That's when I understood. They were only waiting for me to die. That thought stayed with me, heavier than fever, heavier than pain. I had been the backbone of this family for decades. Babysitting their children when they couldn't afford daycare. Lending money when jobs vanished and bills piled up. Quietly paying for braces, surgeries, even rent when their pride was too thin to cover the truth. Nobody asked how I did it. Nobody wanted to know. They just opened their hands, and I filled them. But the moment my own body broke down, when I needed help to walk to the pharmacy, when nights were colder because the heater rattled too much, they vanished. Calls went unanswered. Texts unread. Visits? Only when they wanted to remind me how much my house was worth these days, or to ask if I had written my will yet. One Sunday, I dialed all 3 of them. Straight to voicemail. I left the same message each time. It's Grandma. I could use some company. My voice cracked, but I smiled while I spoke, as if that smile might travel through the line and soften their hearts. It didn't. Hours later, my phone lit up. A text. From my granddaughter, Marissa. Sorry, busy today. Maybe next week. Love you. 2 words, love you, that rang emptier than the silence she left behind. I walked slowly through the house that night. Each room was filled with ghosts, photographs, toys, furniture scarred by years of use. I ran my fingers across the banister, remembering how I studied little hands climbing those same stairs. Now mine shook. I sat at the dining table, oak, heavy, the kind they don't make anymore, and listened to the ticking of the clock on the wall. Each second told me the same truth. I wasn't a person to them anymore. I was an inheritance waiting to be divided. The next morning, I put on my heaviest coat and walked into town. The cold air bit at my cheeks, but it woke something inside me. Something sharper than grief. I stepped into the office of Henry Willis, an old friend of my husband's and a lawyer I trusted more than my own blood. His secretary looked surprised to see me, but she ushered me in without delay. "Joe," Henry said, rising from his leather chair. "You look pale." "I'm sick, I admit it. But not half as sick as what my family has become." He sat me down, poured a glass of water, and waited. I told him everything. The years of sacrifice. The silence now. The way they circled me like vultures, eager for the last breath so they could swoop in. His eyes darkened with each word. "And what do you want me to do?" he asked at last. "I want to make sure they get nothing," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Not a penny. Not a teacup. They'll walk into that will reading expecting to inherit everything I built with my hands. Instead, I want them to hear this. All property is transferred to a children's hospital. My grandchildren inherit only the memory of how they treated me." Henry nodded slowly. "That can be done. But they can't suspect," I said. "Not yet. Let them think I'm still the sweet, foolish grandmother who believes every lie they tell. That way, when the hammer falls, it won't just break them, it'll silence them." We worked on the documents for hours. My hand trembled as I signed, not from weakness, but from clarity. For once, my name wasn't just an afterthought at the bottom of checks. It was the weapon. When I left Henry's office, the winter sun was already dipping low, painting the street in gold and shadow. I stood there for a long moment, watching families hurry home with grocery bags and laughter. My family was out there somewhere, busy pretending I no longer existed. That was fine, because I had just written the ending of our story, and none of them saw it coming. The next week, I played my role to perfection. When my eldest grandson, David, stopped by to borrow money for his construction business, I smiled and brewed him tea. I told him I had a wonderful idea that might help him grow his company faster. I slid a folder across the table. He didn't know that the advice inside would sink him slowly, piece by piece. When Marissa hinted at needing cash for a temporary setback, I handed her a thick envelope. But I made her sign a promissory note first, all sweetness and trust. She barely read it. She thought she was conning me. She didn't see the trap already tightening. And when Tyler, the youngest, mocked me at dinner, Grandma can't even remember what day it is, I simply smiled. Later that night, I opened the drawer where I had kept his forgotten tax documents. Neat, undeniable proof of the money he'd hidden. I placed them carefully in an envelope addressed to the state authorities. They thought I was weak. They thought I was fading. They thought they were already heirs. But every laugh at my expense, every ignored call, every greedy whisper, they were all just brushstrokes in the masterpiece I was painting. And when the canvas is finished, when they sit in that stiff office waiting to claim what they think is theirs, the silence after the lawyer reads my will be louder than thunder. Because I'll be sitting right there in the room, breathing, watching, smiling, waiting for their faces to break. And they will. Oh, they will. They came to me one by one, never together. That's how vultures feed, separately, quietly, so they don't have to face each other's hunger. David was the first. My eldest grandson, 35, already balding from stress, but pretending it was just a new look. He arrived with his tie loosened, boots muddy from his construction sites, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Grandma," he said, lowering himself into the kitchen chair like he was settling into a throne. "You know I wouldn't bother you if it weren't important." I nodded, pouring coffee into his cup. The steam curled up like smoke from a gun barrel. "Of course, dear. What is it this time?" He cleared his throat. "Business has been rough. Supply costs doubled, inspectors breathing down my neck, clients stalling on payments. You know how it is." I didn't. But I smiled anyway. If I could just get a little infusion of cash, temporary, of course, I could push through the slump. Maybe 50,000. I'd pay you back once the next projects roll in. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, the kind men use when they're about to sign away their soul. 50,000, I repeated softly. I tapped the rim of my cup. "That's no small number, David." He leaned forward, eager. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. You've always believed in me, Grandma. And when the company grows, I'll make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. As if I'd been neglected all my life, waiting for him to swoop in like some savior. I rose slowly, joints aching, and walked to the sideboard. From a drawer, I pulled out a slim folder I had prepared the night before. Inside were carefully printed documents I had written with Henry's help. Charts, forecasts, even a proposal that looked like it came from a real consultant. Except it wasn't designed to save him. It was designed to drown him. "Here," I said, sliding the folder across the table. "I've been thinking about you. If you restructure your loans this way, shift some funds, invest in this development, you'll be unstoppable." He flipped through the pages, nodding fast, his greed shining through. "This is incredible, Grandma. Where'd you learn all this?" I smiled thinly. "Experience." What he didn't know was that the development was already in trouble, permits delayed, lawsuits pending, contractors walking out. If he followed my advice, he'd pour every borrowed cent into quicksand. He kissed my cheek before leaving, folder clutched tight. "You're the best, Grandma. You'll see, I'll make you proud." The door closed behind him, and I stood in the quiet kitchen, staring at the fading imprint of his lips on my skin. Proud. That word used to mean something. Now it was just a lie people told to keep my purse open. A week later, Marissa arrived. She didn't knock, she never did. She breezed in with her perfume sharp enough to sting my nose, hair bleached to a shade that made her look older instead of younger. "Grandma, I need your help," she announced, collapsing onto the couch like a starlet fainting for attention. "It's just, things are complicated." Complicated meant her credit cards were maxed, her car payment overdue, and her temporary setback involved more shopping bags than job offers. She dabbed at her eyes, but no tears came. "If you could just lend me 10,000, I'll pay it back in no time. Promise." I reached for the drawer again, this time pulling out an envelope thick with bills. Her eyes widened like a child on Christmas morning. But first, I said gently, just a formality. Sign this note, dear. So I remember when you'll return it. She laughed, tossing her hair. Oh, Grandma, you don't need this. I'm family. I tilted my head. All the more reason to sign. Humor an old woman. With a roll of her eyes, she scrawled her name across the page. No hesitation, no suspicion. She took the cash, kissed my cheek quickly, colder than David's had been, and swept out the door, already on the phone with a friend. As soon as she was gone, I pressed the signed note flat against the table. Legal, binding, undeniable. She thought it was a game. She had no idea that the court would soon call it a debt. Tyler was last. He was always the cruelest because he was the youngest and thought cruelty was clever. He visited only to mock my hearing, my memory, even the way I walked. One night at dinner, he leaned back in his chair and smirked. You know, Grandma, maybe you should sell this place. Who needs a 5-bedroom house when you can't even climb the stairs anymore? The others laughed. I didn't. I just cut my meat into small pieces, slow and steady. Later, when they were gone, I opened the metal box under my bed. Inside were tax documents Tyler had forgotten to declare. Rental income from a property he never reported. I had kept them for years, unsure why. Now I knew. I slid the papers into an envelope addressed to the state tax office. No note, no explanation. Just proof. Let the investigators do the talking. Days passed. I played the part of the doting grandmother, baking pies, asking about their lives, nodding when they brushed me off. But under the surface, the traps were tightening. One evening, Henry called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the satisfaction in it. Joe, the wheels are turning. David signed the contracts. Marissa's note is filed. And Tyler, he chuckled. Let's just say he'll be getting a letter from the state soon. I stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Good, I whispered. Let them think they're winning. Because that was the beauty of it. They believed I was still their safety net. Still the naive old woman who would forgive anything, sign anything, pay for anything. They had no idea the ground beneath them was cracking. A week later, I invited them all for dinner. I cooked their favorites, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie. I set the table with the china they always called outdated. They came, hungry and entitled, laughing too loudly, scrolling through their phones between bites. Grandma, you should really update this kitchen, Marissa said, wrinkling her nose. Yeah, David added, mouth full. When the house is ours, first thing we're doing is gutting it. Open concept, granite counters, the works. Tyler smirked. Assuming it doesn't fall apart before then. I smiled sweetly, pouring more gravy onto their plates. Eat up, I said. You'll need your strength. They laughed, thinking it was just another old lady remark. But in my chest, my heart beat steady and strong. Because I knew something they didn't. The lawyer had set the date. The will was ready. And the next time we all sat around a table, it wouldn't be in my dining room. It would be in a law office. And the feast would be over. Bad luck has a taste. Bitter at first, then metallic, like blood in your mouth after you bite your tongue. I imagined each of them tasting it for the first time and mistaking it for coincidence. David's call came first. His voice was shaky, nothing like the confident man who strutted out of my kitchen with a folder full of golden advice. Grandma, you won't believe this, he said, pacing so hard I could hear his footsteps echoing through the phone. The city pulled the permits on that new site. Something about zoning issues. Can you imagine? I've already poured every cent into it. I clucked my tongue softly. Oh dear. That must be so frustrating. Frustrating? It's a disaster. The suppliers want their money. My crew's walking out. If I don't get another loan, I'm finished. I sipped my tea. I thought you said this plan would make you unstoppable. Silence stretched across the line. Then, desperate, he asked, can you lend me just a little more? Just until things stabilize. Of course, I said gently. But you'll need to put it in writing. His sigh told me he didn't even care anymore. He would sign anything. Perfect. 2 days later, Marissa appeared on my porch. No makeup, no perfume, hair tied back in a messy knot. Her usual armor stripped away. "Grandma," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might break her. "I need more time." "For what, dear?" She bit her lip, tears finally real this time. "The note. The payment. I can't. I can't make it yet." I folded the dish towel in my hands. "Well, the court will decide that, not me." Her eyes snapped up, wide, terrified. "The court? You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "Why wouldn't I?" "You promised." She stumbled back a step, shaking her head like a child caught stealing. She wanted to argue, to cry, but she knew the signature on that note was hers. As she left, she muttered, "This isn't fair." Fair. That was rich coming from her. And then, like a cherry on the cake, came Tyler's storm. It arrived in a plain envelope on his doorstep. Audit notice. Failure to report income. Intent to investigate. He stormed into my house that evening, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. "You did this," he hissed. I set down my knitting needles. "Did what?" His face was red, eyes blazing. "You turned me in." I raised my brows, calm as ever. "Why would I do that?" "Because who else knew?" His hands shook. "You've been sitting on those papers, haven't you? Waiting for this moment." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is louder than confession. He leaned close, pointing a finger at me. "If I go down for this, I swear." The front door creaked open. David walked in, pale as ash. Behind him, Marissa dragged her feet, eyes swollen from crying. For the first time in months, all three of them stood in my living room. Not laughing, not boasting, not dividing up my belongings with sticky notes. Just broken. "What's going on here?" David asked, voice trembling. Tyler spun toward him. "She's behind it, can't you see? All of it. My audit, your permits, her stupid loan scam." "It's not a scam," I interrupted calmly. "It's accountability." They froze, staring at me. Marissa's voice cracked. "Grandma, why are you doing this?" I looked at them, really looked. These were the children I had rocked to sleep, fed from my own hand, carried through sickness and storms. And yet, they had left me to rot the moment I needed them. "Because you taught me," I said. "You taught me that family is only as good as what it gives. So now I'm giving you something back." The room went dead silent. David's fists clenched. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "No. You will." That night, after they stormed out, the house felt lighter. I walked through each room, touching the furniture, the photographs, the memories. This was mine, not theirs. They had already sold me out in their minds, counted me as dead. Now they were the ones fading. The next morning, Henry called again. His tone was clipped, precise. "They're circling, Joe. I've had inquiries already, bankers asking about assets, whispers about contesting the will. But the paperwork is airtight. They won't know the truth until the reading." I stood at the window, sunlight spilling across the floor. Good. Let them plan their renovations. Let them dream about what's already gone. That weekend, I attended church for the first time in months. I wore my simple black coat, the one Marissa had once called old funeral fabric. People greeted me warmly, offered prayers for my health. And as I sat in the pew, I thought about the words I had asked Henry to include at the very end of the will. The part that would cut deeper than money ever could. "I leave my grandchildren only with the memory of how they treated me." A chill rippled down my spine, not fear, not doubt. Just certainty. They thought I was the fragile one. But soon, they would see the truth. And when the day came, I wouldn't be in the ground. I would be in the room. Watching. The thing about cornered animals is they bite. Even if they've been fed their whole lives, even if the hand reaching out once gave them shelter. And my grandchildren, they were no different. The first to strike was Tyler. Always the hothead. He barged into my house 2 days after his audit notice, eyes bloodshot, reeking of whiskey. He slammed a crumpled letter down on the kitchen table. Do you know what this is? He shouted. I adjusted my glasses. It looks like a fine from the state. It's not just a fine. His voice cracked. They're threatening charges. Real ones. Jail, Grandma. Do you get that? I kept my face calm, but inside, a cold satisfaction spread through me like smoke in the lungs. Jail. He who once sneered that I couldn't even remember my own name now had the state remembering his. You'll fix this, he demanded, jabbing a finger at me. You'll call your lawyer friend, pay the fees, make it go away. I folded my hands in my lap. Why should I? He blinked, stunned. Because I'm family. I let out a slow breath. So was I. Until you decided I wasn't worth answering the phone for. His jaw worked, but no words came. He stormed out, muttering curses, slamming the door so hard a photo frame rattled on the wall. But Tyler wasn't the only one unraveling. David came next, shoulders sagging, suit rumpled, sweat shining on his forehead. He sank into a chair without asking, running both hands over his face. The bank froze my line of credit, he said hollowly. Suppliers are suing. I could lose everything. I poured him a glass of water and set it in front of him. He didn't touch it. I followed your plan, he whispered. I trusted you. I tilted my head. Funny, isn't it? Trust only seems to matter when you're the one who needs it. He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw something break in his eyes. Not guilt. Not remorse. Just fear. I'll figure it out, he muttered, standing abruptly. But his hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped his briefcase. Marissa's fall was quieter. She stopped answering my calls entirely. When I finally saw her, it was at the grocery store. She was standing at the checkout, arguing with the cashier because her card had been declined. I watched from the other lane as her face flushed, her voice rose, her hands trembled. She didn't see me. Or maybe she pretended not to. That night, I found a letter shoved under my door. No envelope. Just shaky handwriting. Grandma, please. Don't take me to court. I'll pay you back. I promise. Just give me time. I folded the paper neatly and placed it in the same folder as her signed note. Promises were like paper, easy to fold, easier to tear. But the real danger came not from their failures, but from their desperation. It started with whispers. I overheard them in my own living room one evening when I pretended to be napping in the armchair. The three of them had gathered, voices low but sharp. She's not sick enough, Tyler hissed. She could last years like this. David muttered, she's playing us. I don't know how, but she is. Marissa's voice trembled. Don't be ridiculous. She's just old. She doesn't know what she's doing. Then why are we all falling apart while she's sitting there smiling? David snapped. A pause. Then Tyler again, we need to get ahead of this. If she rewrote the will. Don't say that, Marissa whispered. She wouldn't dare. She would, David said flatly. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I kept breathing slow, steady, like a real sleeper. They suspected. Maybe not the details, not the hospital, not the foundation, but enough to make them dangerous. When they left, the house fell into silence so heavy I could hear my own heart. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The game had changed. No longer were they just greedy. Now they were suspicious. I needed to move faster. The next morning, I walked to Henry's office. The chill air stung my lungs, but it sharpened my resolve. They're restless, I told him as I sank into the leather chair. They're sniffing around the will. Henry adjusted his glasses. We're ready, Joe. The documents are secure. Even if they try to challenge, they won't win. I leaned forward, my voice low. Then set the date. Soon. Before their desperation turns into something worse. He nodded. 2 weeks. I left his office with the sun in my eyes and the wind at my back. But as I turned the corner, I saw something that made me pause. Tyler's car. Parked across the street. His head tilted just enough that I knew he'd been watching me. Our eyes met for a single, electric second before he started the engine and drove off. By the time I reached home, my hands were trembling. Not from age, not from weakness, but from the knowledge that the cornered animals weren't just biting. They were hunting. That evening, I locked every door, every window. I sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp burning, the folder of documents spread before me like armor. They thought they were circling prey. But prey doesn't plan. Prey doesn't write wills with knives hidden between the lines. I wasn't prey. I was patient. And patience, when it finally strikes, doesn't miss. 2 weeks. That's what Henry promised. 2 weeks until the reading. 2 weeks until every mask slipped. But 2 weeks is a long time when desperate people are circling. The first crack showed in David. I found him on my porch one morning, slumped against the railing, tie loose, his eyes sunken. He looked less like a businessman and more like a beggar. "Grandma," he rasped, standing quickly when I opened the door. "I need to come inside." I let him. He shuffled past me, the smell of stale sweat clinging to him like another layer of clothes. He sat at the table, ran his hands through his thinning hair, and whispered, "They're going to sue me. Clients, suppliers, even the bank. Everything's collapsing." I poured him tea, placed it in front of him, and said nothing. He leaned forward. "I know you've got something set aside. Savings. A trust, maybe. Just give me a little, just to get them off my back. When I rebuild, I'll make it right." His hands shook as he reached for mine. "You wouldn't let me drown, would you?" I pulled my hand back. "You're already drowning, David. I just stopped holding the rope." His mouth opened, but no words came. He stared at me like I was a stranger, then stumbled out the door, muttering, "You'll regret this." We all will. He was right about one thing. They were starting to act together. That evening, Marissa called. Her voice was high, sharp, desperate. "You're suing me?" "Your own granddaughter." "I'm enforcing an agreement," I said. "You know I don't have it," she shrieked. "You know that. How could you drag me into court?" I waited for her to breathe, then answered quietly, "You signed." "I kept the paper. That's how." Her sobs echoed down the line, followed by a click. "No goodbye." Tyler didn't bother with tears. He came pounding on my door, fists like hammers. When I opened it, his face was twisted with rage. "You ruined me," he yelled. "I've got investigators crawling through my accounts, my job on the line. You did this." I leaned on my cane, meeting his fury with stillness. "You did it to yourself." He stepped closer, too close. His breath reeked of whiskey. "If you weren't my grandmother." I cut him off, my voice sharp as glass. "But I am. And that's the only reason you're not already in handcuffs tonight." For a heartbeat, I thought he might strike me. His hand twitched. Then he backed away, eyes burning, and spat on the porch before storming off. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the armchair, lamp glowing, folder in my lap. Their threats didn't frighten me, not really. What chilled me was the way they looked at me now. Not like family. Not even like prey. Like an obstacle. And obstacles, in their world, get removed. The next day, Henry called again. His voice was calm, but urgent. "Joe, I need to warn you. There are rumors. The 3 of them have been seen together at a cafe downtown, talking to another lawyer. If they're planning to challenge the will, they'll fail," I said flatly. "Yes," he agreed. "But desperate people don't think about failing. They think about striking first." I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the sunlight spilling across the floor. The warmth felt thin. That evening, I tested every lock again. I closed the curtains. I even pushed a chair against the back door. I told myself it was precaution, not fear. But when night settled heavy over the house, every creak in the wood sounded like footsteps. 2 nights later, the storm came. I woke to voices in the yard. Muffled, urgent, angry. I slipped out of bed, pulled on my robe, and crept to the window. 3 shadows. My blood ran cold. David's nervous pacing. Marissa's sharp gestures. Tyler's fists clenched, knuckles white. I cracked the window, letting their whispers drift inside. "She's hiding something," David hissed. "I told you, the will. She's rewriting it." Marissa snapped. Tyler's voice was low, venomous. Then we force her hand. Tonight. I pulled the window shut, heart thudding. My cane shook in my grip, not from weakness, but from rage. They weren't just circling anymore. They were ready to strike. I stepped back, steadying myself, and whispered into the empty room, "Come, then. Try." Because in less than a week, Henry would read the words that would break them. And if they wanted a fight before that, I was ready. The next morning, I called Henry. "Move the date up," I told him. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Before they do something they can't undo." He hesitated, then said, "I'll arrange it." I hung up, looked around my quiet house, and felt something strange rise in me. Not fear. Not sorrow. A spark. They thought they were about to corner me. But they had no idea the walls were already closing in on them. They didn't knock this time. They barged in. It was late afternoon. The house still smelled of stew simmering on the stove. I just set down my spoon when the front door banged open, and all three of them filed inside. "No, hello, no, how are you?" Just faces carved out of fear and fury. David spoke first, his voice sharp, brittle. "We need to talk. Now." I folded my napkin neatly on the table. "About what?" Marissa crossed her arms. "Don't play games. We know you've changed the will." I raised my brows, calm. "Do you?" Tyler slammed his fist on the table. The bowls rattled. "Stop pretending. We're not stupid." "Debatable," I said softly. His face flushed crimson. For a moment, I thought he might lunge. But David grabbed his arm. "Not here," he muttered. "Not like this." Then David leaned toward me, lowering his voice as if secrecy might make it sting less. "Grandma, listen. If you're rewriting things, you need to reconsider. We've earned our share. After everything we've done for you." I laughed. Low, bitter. "Everything you've done for me? Tell me, David, was it when you ignored my calls? Or when you mocked me at dinner? Or when you tried to carve up my house before I was even in the ground?" Silence. Marissa's lip trembled, but her voice was sharp. "You don't understand, Grandma. We need this. We can't survive without it." I met her eyes. "And since when is survival my burden? I carried all of you for decades. Babysat, paid, covered your mistakes. Now you want me to die so you can breathe easier." "No one said that," she cried. "You didn't have to," I replied. Tyler stepped forward again, teeth bared. "If you think you can cut us out, you're wrong. We'll challenge it. We'll drag you into court. We'll say you're not in your right mind." That word, mind, hung in the air like a knife. I stood slowly, my cane pressing firm against the floor. "My mind is sharper than yours ever was, Tyler. And it remembers everything." I walked to the sideboard, opened a drawer, and pulled out a slim black folder. Their eyes followed every move. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. David frowned. "Some papers. Evidence," I said. I laid them out on the table one by one. Marissa's promissory note. David's contract with his doomed development. Tyler's unreported income forms, neatly copied. Each of you signed your own downfall. You made it easy. Marissa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David paled. Tyler cursed under his breath. "You wouldn't use those," David whispered. I leaned forward. "They're already in motion. Courts, auditors, agencies, they'll hear your names long before a judge hears mine. So go ahead. Challenge me. Tell the world your grandmother is crazy. But when the evidence comes, it won't be me in the papers. It'll be you." The room fell silent except for the steady tick of the clock on the wall. For a moment, I saw them as children again, small, scared, cornered by the truth. But those children were gone, long ago. All that remained were wolves who thought age meant weakness. Finally, Marissa broke. Her voice was a whisper. "Why are you doing this to us?" I stared at her. "Because you already did it to me." They left soon after. Not quietly. Doors slammed, threats muttered, Tyler's tires screeched down the road. But they left. That night, I locked every door twice. Then I called Henry. "It's time," I said. His voice was steady. "Tomorrow, then." The next morning, I dressed in my best navy dress, the one my husband always said made me look like I still had fire in my eyes. I pinned my silver hair back, slipped on my old pearl earrings, and walked out the door. Henry's office was cool, polished, heavy with the scent of leather and paper. He greeted me with a nod and led me to the conference room. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I've been ready for years," I said. And as I sat in that stiff leather chair, waiting for my grandchildren to arrive, I felt no fear. Only anticipation. They thought today would save them. Instead, it would bury them alive, with me watching every flicker of their faces as the truth was read aloud. They filed into Henry's office like actors arriving for a premiere. David in his crumpled suit, trying to look professional. Marissa in oversized sunglasses, hiding swollen eyes. Tyler swaggering, jaw tight, fists clenched, as if violence could substitute for inheritance. I was already seated at the far end of the long oak table. None of them expected me to be there. Marissa froze first. "Grandma?" "Yes," I said. My voice was steady, alive and breathing. "Surprised?" David cleared his throat. "We thought you'd be resting at home." "I rest when I choose," I replied. Henry entered then, briefcase in hand, glasses perched on his nose. His presence filled the room like a judge stepping onto the bench. "Thank you all for coming. Today we will read the last will and testament of Josephine Hale." Tyler snorted. "Finally." Henry ignored him, opening the folder with slow precision. Papers rustled like thunderclouds gathering. "The deceased," he began. "I'm not deceased," I cut in. He glanced at me, then adjusted his words. "The client, Mrs. Hale, has prepared instructions for her estate. These instructions are legally binding and have been notarized, witnessed, and filed with the court." David leaned forward, eager. "Yes, let's get to the numbers." Henry cleared his throat and began. "To my grandson David Hale, I acknowledge the years you spent claiming my furniture with sticky notes before my body was even cold. For that foresight, I leave you." He paused, eyes scanning the page. "The sum of $1. The room cracked open. $1. David exploded. "This is a joke." Henry continued calmly. "To my granddaughter Marissa Hale, I acknowledge the countless times you called me only when your cards declined, never when your heart was full. For that loyalty, I leave you $1. Marissa ripped off her sunglasses. "She can't do this." "I helped her. I was there." "You were there for the money," I said quietly. Her face burned red. Henry went on, voice steady, unshaken. "To my grandson Tyler Hale, I acknowledge the years of insults, mockery, and the joy you found in belittling me. For that generosity, I leave you $1. Tyler shot to his feet, chair scraping the floor. "This is fraud. She's lost her mind. She's been manipulated." Henry slid another paper across the table. "Independent evaluation of Mrs. Hale's mental capacity. Signed by a physician, certified and notarized. Her mind is intact. Her memory is sharper than most men half your age." David slammed his hand on the table. "This is theft." "No," Henry said, voice like iron. "This is justice." Marissa's voice broke into sobs. "Where's the rest? Where's the estate? The house? The accounts?" Henry flipped to the final page. "All remaining property, assets, and accounts are transferred to the Hale Children's Hospital Foundation, a trust created to provide shelter, medicine, and education for children without families." The words hit like gunfire. David sagged in his chair. Marissa covered her face. Tyler swore loudly, pacing like a caged animal. Henry read the closing line. "To my grandchildren, I leave only the memory of how they treated me. May that memory keep them warmer than the blankets they never brought me, fuller than the meals they never shared, and closer than the calls they never returned." Silence filled the room. They looked at me then, all three, as if waiting for me to laugh, to soften, to take it back. I didn't. I leaned on my cane, stood slowly, and met each of their eyes. You buried me while I was still alive, I said. Now you can live with the ghost you made. David whispered, Grandma, please. No, I said. It's too late for please. Henry closed the folder with a firm snap. That concludes the reading. Tyler shoved his chair aside. We'll fight this. You'll see. We'll drag you to court until you're too broke to breathe. I smiled, cold and steady. Then I'll watch you drown in paperwork. And every document you signed will be there waiting. For the first time, I saw it in their faces, not just greed, not just anger. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Because they realized it was over. And worse, I was still here to see it. The whole reading ended, but the storm didn't. They spilled out of Henry's office like broken pieces of glass, sharp and dangerous, but powerless to cut me anymore. I walked behind them slowly, cane tapping on the marble floor, each step echoing like a gavel. Outside, David spun around, face pale and sweaty. You can't do this, Grandma. You'll ruin us. I met his eyes. No, you ruined yourselves. I just wrote it down. Marissa clutched her designer purse to her chest as if it still held value. Everyone will know. The neighbors, my friends, how could you humiliate me like this? I tilted my head. Funny, I asked myself the same thing every time you ignored my calls. Tyler didn't speak. He just stared at me with eyes like knives, jaw twitching, fists clenched. But he didn't swing. He knew better now. Henry stepped out then, papers in hand. It's done. Irrevocable. If they want to waste money challenging it, they can. But they won't win. I nodded, thanked him, and walked away without looking back. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, lavender candle flickering beside me. The same one I once imagined lighting with my family. Instead, I lit it for myself. For survival. For clarity. Over the next weeks, the cracks became chasms. David's business collapsed. The lawsuits multiplied. His name was dragged through the papers, creditors circling like vultures. He moved out of his house, his wife gone, his pride shattered. Marissa's case hit the court. My lawyer filed the promissory note. She showed up in trembling heels, face caked with makeup to hide the truth, and the judge ordered her to repay every cent with interest. When she cried out, "But she's my grandmother," the courtroom echoed with laughter that wasn't mine. Tyler's audit turned into a full investigation. The income he hid was undeniable. His employer fired him, his accounts frozen, his reputation shredded. He called me once, late at night, voice raw. Why did you do it? I didn't answer. I let the silence hang, heavy as iron, and then ended the call. Words spread fast. Neighbors whispered. Old friends shook their heads. Everyone knew now. Not just about their greed, but about my choice. About the hospital. About the children who would eat, sleep, and heal in rooms bought with the money my grandchildren thought was theirs. And for the first time in years, people didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. One Sunday, I visited the new wing of the hospital. It wasn't finished yet, but the walls were painted bright, the windows wide. A nurse walked me through, showing me where the beds would be, where the playroom would sit, where the photographs of donors would hang. At the entrance, there was already a plaque. My name, not as an afterthought, not as an ATM, but as a benefactor. I touched the metal with my fingertips, cold and smooth. This, I whispered, is my family now. When I returned home, 3 cars were parked outside. My grandchildren, waiting on my porch. David stepped forward first, thinner than I'd ever seen him. Please, he said. We're sorry. We'll change. Marissa's mascara ran down her cheeks. Grandma, we didn't mean. Tyler cut her off, voice low, shaking. Just give us another chance. I climbed the steps slowly, cane clicking, heart steady. I looked at each of them, one by one. You had years of chances, I said. And you spent them mocking, ignoring, and waiting for me to die. Now you can spend the rest of your years remembering it. David reached for my hand. I pulled it away. Marissa sobbed. Tyler stared, hollow, as if the fight had finally drained out of him. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and shut it behind me. Their voices spilled through the wood, pleading, angry, desperate, but I didn't open it again. I sat at the kitchen table, candles still burning, the house filled with a peace I hadn't felt in decades. They thought I would leave them wealth. Instead, I left them truth. And truth is the one inheritance no thief can spend. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered the last words I would ever give them. You wanted my death to make you rich. But I lived, and that made you poor.